Hello and welcome to another edition of our video podcast at the Flashpoint Now. Here we speak with technology leaders to understand how enterprise technology is evolving and what it means for businesses. For today's discussion, I am joined by Sidharth Sahu, who is Head of Product Technology at Quess Corp. Siddharth has spent over a decade in the language AI space, building products at the intersection of artificial intelligence, document processing, and enterprise software. He has worked across engineering, product management, architecture, and now AI. So Siddharth, welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kailash. Glad to be here. And like we were discussing a few moments earlier, that since we are in Bangalore, we know that it's a very pleasant Saturday.
Siddharth, to get started, you've spent more than 10 years in the language AI space, which means you have witnessed the industry both before and after the start of the Gen AI wave. What has surprised you the most about the way enterprises have embraced language AI over the years? Would Siddharth from 10 years ago be surprised at today's AI adoption, particularly in the language and document processing space? All your
Right. Thanks, Kailash. So yes, I've spent over a decade, in natural language processing and primarily language technologies for the better part of my career. I got to say that in the early NLP era, where everything was rule based, and then there came an inflection point where neural networks started pouring into the market and to the open source community, especially after Attention is All That You Need, with the paper that came out by Vaswani. And that changed everything. With the introduction of transformers, then things went from, the transition actually started for generative AI. And then right now we are in the Agentic AI era. So everything is kind of related until the discovery or invention of transformers, I would say. So from my perspective, I've seen multiple inflection points right now, right? So earlier it was all symbolic AI, and it was all rule-based, very extractive. And then the inflection point came where predictive AI, neural networks came in, and then transformers came in and generative AI wave started. And now the entire agentic AI, wave that is there, and it is here to stay. So it's nothing but a harness layer on top of generative AI. But I mean, the kind of things that you can do with agents and agentic AI is spectacular. It is overwhelming, and it just keeps you on your wedge, keeps you on the edge to always stay evolving. Now, when it comes to languages, I would say that in languages, we earlier used to, in I think early 2014 when I started my career, that time POS tagging, like parts of speech tagging, named entity recognition with rules, statistical pipelines were there. NLTK used to be the go-to library for all the developers. That was the Stanford's core NLP, public package. And after that, I think in probably 2016, if I'm not wrong, Spacey came out, and Spacey was the talk of the town because, fast pipelines, clean APIs, entity extraction, dependency parsing, everything was bundled up into one beautiful library. And I think I don't know any NLP developer who has not used Spacey back in the day. Then the deep learning era started, where TensorFlow came in, PyTorch followed. NLP started, transitioning from handcrafted logic or features to neural architectures. And that was very, very interesting. It was kind of struggle also, because all that we were doing is learning on the job. So we did a lot of experiments, failed at a lot, succeeded in few. And that is how most of the devs kind of learned their way in, leading to, getting ready for the next wave. Once the transformers made an entry into the market, the state-of-the-art models were open sourced by Google. Sequence-to-sequence, sec-to-sec model was also open source. That time, it was a game changer. So if I have to say that we were working, in my first company, we were working on machine translation, transliteration, named entity recognition, sentiment analysis. All of these were done classically by parts of speech tagging. I myself was part of, I was actually building the entire application called Lexilor for my first organization, where it was an internal tool where a lot of data team members were Their only job was going ahead, reading sentences and tagging what are the verbs, what are the adverbs, what are the nouns, right? And when it comes to Indian languages, the problem becomes, I guess, 22 folds, because 22 official languages are there, because every language has its own nuances. Although few of my seniors who are there, they have been working so deep with Indic technologies and Indian languages that they probably have identified what is the commonality or the central nervous system that connects all the Indian languages. But from a computing perspective, it's very different and very challenging. Right? When it comes to especially data annotation, lot of data is available in English. The internet is filled with English, and I think we all know that data is king, right? So more data, better models. And in Indian languages, or let's say Arabic, the languages from the MENA region, they struggle in producing the best models because the available data is either very less or the available data is of very low quality. And then imagine China uses two languages, easy to annotate, have people going at them. Like once the data gets ready, then models get trained. Same thing with European and English. So that is why the best of models that we have in this day and age are all English first. In my previous companies, wherever I've worked in languages, our goal more or less has been the same thing, that how do you make more with less? So working with low resource languages to make better models is primarily what has been the mission in the earlier days. Right now, obviously, I've transformed into a very different domain. We'll probably talk about that later. But yeah, this has been the overall journey from symbolic to predictive to generative to agentic in the language computing space.
Siddharth, you've worn many hats over the years, from software engineering to platform architecture, product leadership. Today, you're leading research on advanced AI systems, looking at languages. Looking back, what has changed most in the way you think about solving problems? Was there a point where you started thinking less like an engineer and more like a product leader? How does that work?
It's a very, I don't know, I've had a very interesting and odd journey. Thanks to all my managers, co-founders, I've been always surrounded by great people. So that has been the single biggest factor in people kind of celebrating the going out of comfort zone DNA that I had, I would say. So when I was in my first company, just fresh out of college, we were working on things like pause tagging and all, like I was just mentioning, ambiguous tokenizers for transliteration and so many things. And during that time, I was part of Reverie Language Technologies, and because of the name itself, right, a lot of inbound that kept on coming was that, hey, we have some documents, can you translate, right? So it was like the expectation in the market because of just the name was that it is a translation company. But whereas in the labs, me and the entire team, and we were a team of, a very slim team of techies, around 15 people, including the founder, who is a brilliant software engineer himself, Vivekananda Pani. So we all were developing cutting edge technologies on Indian languages. But the perception in the market was that, okay, these guys are a translation company, right? And that kind of led me as an individual to try thinking about how can I contribute at changing that perception. So that led me to go ahead and propose my founders that, boss, I'm not really liking this perception that is out there in the market. People are kind of thinking that we are a translation services company. Why not make a tool where we convert our perceived customers to perceived competitors into our own customers, right? Why not build a translation marketplace where all of these translation agencies can come together? The demand comes in through the clients. There are freelance translators also. And that is what led to my first product from scratch, which was called Prabandhak. And it was the first AI-powered translation marketplace in India. During that time, SmartCat existed in the US. 1 year down the lane, I think Devanagari and all started coming in, and we started to capture some market. They started to capture other market. One of our big wins was, the income tax website entirely got localized with Prabandhak itself. So that happening, the multiple hats that I had to wear was because it is basically, I never, in my earlier company, right, I remember my signature in the email never changed from software engineer. But At that time, I was actually owning up a product, built it from scratch, took the MVP out in the market, hired a team, and then started taking it full on out with the team. So it was never, a stepwise ascension, I would say. It was like from day one when an idea kicked in. Since that, I've always tried to stay entrepreneurial. That, okay, I own this piece, I'm accountable for it, and let me give my all in for this thing. So that is how my transitions at least felt very fluid to me. Never worrying about what the designation looks on signature.
Very interesting take and a very interesting journey there, Siddharth. I want to pick one point you just made. Do you think a perception problem or a marketing gap still exists when it comes to language AI? Is there not enough awareness? The values not being communicated effectively enough? Do you think there is still some truth to this statement?
It's a mixed, I would say, territory. Back in the day, I remember we released a developers platform in 2017, I believe, which was called RevUp. And all the technologies that we had built, like translation, transliteration, named entity recognition, all of these services, we kind of made it available in terms of API. It was a dev platform. So we expected the developers to start using our APIs and all. But it never worked out because, it's a tricky region where we know that we have to embrace our languages in our computing in India, but the ROI validation becomes very, very difficult. So I remember for e-commerce giant, we had, integrated languages as a service, and we localized the entire website, the product inventory, the language switch was seamless. And we not only wanted to localize the website, we also wanted to give a first-class feel to the local language users. So what I mean by that is any website that you go which has, let's say, language conversion or localization as a feature, there almost every time you feel like it is an English website which is localized to, let's say, Hindi, right? It never feels like it's a Hindi website or Tamil web app, right? So because of that, we wanted to make sure that at least when we are delivering, then we will make sure that there are no rendering issues. We did not want any kind of spelling errors. We did not want poor contextless translations, right? So that is what we tried offering. The footfall increased. The conversions remained the same. Going and doing a deep dive, we understood that at the end of the day, when you're doing a purchase, you anyways again have to still enter an English email address. And that tier 3, tier 4 audience, which would probably would have liked using that app in their own language, they are not well versed with creating a Gmail account and doing stuff like that, right? But this was again very 2015, 16, 17 kind of era. After that, in today's day and age, because I work in a very different industry now, which is not related to languages or NLP as of now, it's all about, hiring people and giving jobs and livelihoods to people. So there we also deal with a lot of tier 3 or 4 city individuals. And it's a delight to see that the smartphone adoption, the technology adoption in India has evolved, enormously. So Sarvam is doing great in language AI space. They are probably, they also are not getting that market capture or, let's say if we are talking about a speech agent, right? It's not, I think it's a cultural reasons might be there. So I've seen people that, okay, Bulbul came out from Sarvam, sounded great. And I still see people going to 11 labs, right? And not contributing to Sarvam enough. And Sarvam, the way they started, I think the Bhashadan initiative that they did, and that was actually a very interesting journey. And people talk today about sovereign AI, but I have huge regards for the people at Sarvam because they actually thought of it much before this became the talk of the town. Right? They wanted that data should be created in India on Indian languages, and we use that data to build the state-of-the-art models, language models, and speech engines, text-to-speech engines, ASRs, everything for Indian languages. And that was a very, very good good initiative. Few other players also like Gyani. Yes, my previous company Reverie was also there. All of these companies had a very, very mission-driven instinct, I would say, where they wanted to do something for sovereign AI. Now, just because Fable 5 and all got banned and they released it yesterday or something, but back in that time when these things were still under the hood, kind of, sovereign AI was always a mission for many of the companies, and even today it is there. So yeah, I think when you asked about if it is a perception gap or a marketing gap, so this is what is happening. So for SaaS consumption, I think we are still an evolving market when it comes to language technology adoption, because it is hard to justify ROI. So that is what has been happening.
Siddharth, speaking about non-English languages and the problem you mentioned earlier, that the data sets are simply not as vast as for English. I would assume that tackling this would involve some unconventional approaches, the
Absolutely.
classical thinking out of the box strategy, innovation. How do you build a culture of innovation here where people are comfortable experimenting, questioning assumptions? It's okay to fail. How do you go about that?
I think, if I have to talk about innovation as a practice, then it's fear of failure which you have to let go, right? So that culture in India, again, the investments required, the resources required, that definitely needs a massive push from all avenues, including government, I would say, right? Research projects, which are very deep tech. For example, if you are trying to build a single language LLM, for example, or an entire harness layer built in India, made in India, for India kind of stack, right? So that LLMs, so right now almost all open LLMs are great at tool calling, but are we developing enough tools in India which can be an absolute game changer when it comes to doing anything agentic, for example, right? So I would say investment is lacking. Investment definitely needs to be there. There needs to be, and everything, all of the at least heavy lifting parts when creating a model, you need heavy infrastructure. So we need definitely a lot more research grants. And then in India, the culture is any fresher who starts off a job, they immediately have to start thinking about many things other than the work that they do. That is the honest reality, right? They have a family to feed. They have to get on a job. Salary aa jani chahiye. That is kind of the bottom line. Who, like, almost every 90% or 80% of the entire IT crowd focuses on. But then people who genuinely want to research and build better models, they need some one-stop shop kind of avenue where they can simply go ahead, start creating a community, start collecting data, build data initiatives and do all of those things, and then do. And it is not that unsolvable problem that we all think it is. I'll give you a very small example. In Arabic, in my just previous startup, which was Neural Space, we went out from Indian languages, we went and focused on Arabic only, right? And Arabic was kind of our own market where we were trying to build a lot of models and all. Now in Arabic, document AI and document processing, back office automation, all of these use cases started pouring in the moment we gave a hint to the market that, hey, we are trying to solve for Arabic, right? So the customer demand is there, definitely there in low resource language, right? I've seen use cases in which, let's say in India, court documents from local courts want to get translated, summarized, and then structurally put together so that it becomes a very, very authentic source of records in one normalized layer, which is English. So let's say there is a court in Odisha, there is a court in Madras, and their court rulings have come out. But if you want to save all of those in a central repository with people's name extracted properly, what was the case about, what was, let's say, what was the verdict, who was the judge, when was the incident which took place at what time, all of those things, there have been use cases which I have come across where they wanted a central repository in English so that they can search through it. Whereas, why can't it be so that there is a very different approach to it so that you can do a cross-lingual search, right? So rather than having the approach of converting all the languages to one single layer and then doing the query on top of that, that is a very efficient practice. I agree. In fact, If you would have asked me to solve that problem in the quickest possible way, I would have done the same thing. But the thing is, I would have done it because there is no other avenues to solve that problem, right? And there are, so going back to, I digressed a little bit. So in Arabic, for example, solving critical problems, we started off with the basic OCR engine, which is Tesseract, right? So Tesseract is by far the most popular library which has been existing from God knows when, but it was doing a very decent job at Arabic. The problem with Tesseract was that the input files need to be pre-processed a lot. They have to be converted into grayscale. They have to be like skew perfected, skewed and all. So a lot of pre-processing. I'll not go that deep into it, but all of that used to be done as a pre-processing pipeline, then fed into Tesseract, and then the OCR used to come out. Now, in that, the problem was that these languages, especially our Indian languages and Arabic in this context as well, they contain small nuances which are called diacritic, right? Ja and za. The difference is one nukta. So Tesseract was not able to identify these minute characters, and it was almost always failing at diacritics. So, but this was in 2022. So a lot of advancements had come in. Transformer-based OCR models had also started pouring in. There were frameworks like DocTR, TROCR, all of these things. But the data that you train the model on, that is not there. That was not there, right? So what we did was we broke our brains on how to solve this, and finally we came to a very, I would say, very different approach. Okay, so the model that we actually found to be doing or which we selected was called Pix2Struct. It is a Google open source model, very heavy, but it is a visual question answering model. So what happens is you enter an image and you enter a text. In the processing layer, what actually happens is the text actually becomes an image and gets embedded to the top of the image. And after that, the model predicts text. So in the final layer, the inference layer, the output is text. But what happens is your question plus the image becomes one full image, and then the Pix2Struct model actually predicts the text output. And it has been pre-trained on probably 12 million or 20 million some English screenshots where bounding box detections are fed into this transformer-based model. Questions are given, synthetically generated, and the answers are also fed. I mean, that is the entire data set. So images, questions, and answers, these are the entire data set. Now for Arabic, how do you do that? So what we did spend about 2 to 3 weeks in devising was a complete web crawler and parser, which automatically goes to random Arabic websites, right? And then takes a screenshot. Before taking the screenshot, the lot of HTML and JavaScript, like actually JavaScript intervention goes in. So we inject bounding boxes on multiple sections of the website. And then what we do is we prepare the data like that, right? So the data preparation happened. Then what we did was we synthetically created images with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So basically we dynamically created websites. Almost the data was again 10 million or something that we created synthetically. And then we fed it to Pix2Struct to pre-train it and then train it on a downstream task of OCR. So basically we augmented the visual question answering model to saying that, hey, what is written here? And it answered with the OCR. So it was a very unconventional way of doing OCR. We used a model for doing OCR, and the data was like synthetically created for pre-training as well as downstream tasks. But that solved the diacritics problem forever. There was not a single word which contained a diacritic and was missed, right? And that then led to the other functions, because you don't want only extractions to be done, right? You want insights to be derived, or you want to trigger some workflows based on what was found here. So all of those things then started happening because the base model became so accurate. We also benchmarked it against a huge data set, and the character error rate was actually at par with the best enterprise OCR for Arabic at that time. So the point I'm trying to say is that if you put your brains into one difficult problem at a time, probably you will be able to come up with the most unconventional solutions, right? But you need that space and avenue. Our motivation was there is a customer with money standing there. We knew that, okay, if we build this, then we are going to get that money, right? And that's about it. That was the push. But for research in India, you would definitely need that kind of motivation that, hey, what's in it for me, from nationalists' perspective also, right? That, okay, for India, we are building the best sovereign model, and we are kind of innovating with the architectures. So that part is somehow missing.
This has been a fascinating peek into what goes on behind the scenes to make OCR work, how to tackle non-English languages. We, as the end user, we take it for granted. Point your phone camera at a piece of text and you just have it, along with formatting these days, not just a raw dump of text, but one hurdle and how the whole thing could break, and how you ensure it doesn't break. That's the fascinating bit there. Thank you so much, Siddharth, for sharing your perspectives with us, some highlights of your professional journey with us, and some examples of how you tackled technical difficulties. But before we let you go, it would be amiss not to have a crystal ball gazing session. What's in store next 3 to 5 years? Language AI. Do you think we'll see some radical change, exponential improvements, linear, or have we plateaued? Would you take the risk of saying that? Just your view for the immediate future.
One thing very clearly stands out: agents are here to stay. When it comes to languages as a technology, there could not be a happier person than me, who has worked almost all my life in languages. That languages today have become the operational layer of technology. You type in natural language text, things happen. That is as simple as that, right? So languages today have become the operating layer of software itself. Gen AI is absolutely brilliant when it comes to the vision language models. Right now, all the models which are coming out are multi-modal. So they are solving the entire OCR problems that we had. And in essence, the models are becoming smarter day by day. So eventually we will reach a point where at least OCR for non-English, I think OCR for English is kind of a solved problem as of now. But just OCR is probably not what anyone wants anymore. They want structure detection with OCR, streamlining it into a very structured document. So layout detection plus structure detection plus hierarchy detection of information hierarchy detection with OCR, and all of that in a way, let's say a Chat GPT or even GPT-4 OSS or Gemma 4, for example, the latest open source ones from Google, they are able to do brilliantly. If you run a 26 billion parameter on your local machine, it will probably give you all the OCR and extraction things that you need for your back office automation, right? So that there in the document processing part and all, I think it is going to plateau very soon, probably in the next 2 years or 3 years. Agentic AI is here to stay, because I think still, even with Hermes or OpenClaw and all the Claw family, PicoClaw, NanoClaw, everything that came out suddenly, I think to around April, May or February, March, if I'm not wrong. Then, so those are just baby steps at what agents can possibly do, right? Because now the brain, which is the LLM, is getting more smarter and smarter. If you start giving it good ammunitions or arsenals, like let's say web browsing as a skill, you give them payment authority, for example, right? For agentic commerce. Those are avenues which are definitely going to see a huge uptake and adoptability as well, because it is doing what Netflix did for movies. It is doing the same for techies. It is selling convenience, and the best part, it is free as of now. The open source community is kind of giving a run for their money to OpenAI, to Claude, Anthropic, to Gemini, everybody, and China is very aggressive at getting those models out as well. There are far better models at much cheaper cost also, which have started coming out. So agents are here to stay. We are definitely going to reach a plateau, and it is going to become a solved problem when it comes to multilingual document processing, I'm pretty sure. Voice agents are definitely going to evolve very soon. There are some good research papers which have started coming out, and a lot of better frameworks are also coming out. And I'm sure, at least that way, I'm a little satisfied that Sarvam is actively doing research and working on Indian languages as of now so much. And so speech in Indian languages, I would say, is definitely going to see a very, very good future in the next 2 or 3 years. And apart from that, like I said, agents are here to stay. All the agentic AI solutions or frameworks which are there, they are just the baby steps. We in the community are trying to still, think beyond what is possible with the current state of art. And I think sky's the limit there as of now, because agents can literally come in each and everywhere as the brain keeps on getting smarter. I think in our country's perspective, if any fresher or any guy who joins me with my team, right, I give them one very strong advice that you don't need to, first of all, you don't have the resources to train your own large LLM, right? Huge LLM. So accept the fact, start building tools instead that the LLMs can use, right? So if your tools start becoming very, very stronger, the harness layer starts becoming very strong, then I think you will be able to innovate much faster.
So on that optimistic note, thank you very much for spending a part of your Saturday morning with us. Once again, fascinating peek into the technicalities of what makes AI document processing happen, from OCRs to context to NLP. There was a time when how to put a search query into Google the right way to get the most useful result. That was a skill you had to have. Today you type out your thoughts, and even if it's not a literal match for the words you've put in, it seems to understand the intent and give you results. For that magic to happen, what happens behind the scenes? You gave us a peek into that. Great conversation.